Hello and welcome to MTG CubeTube. My name is Sjoerd and this channel is for people interested in making or curating a cube. For this episode the topic is adding the sixth color. And with that of course I mean colorless, or more precisely cards that specifically require colorless mana, something called Wingdings mana, like Thought-Knot Seer and Reality Smasher. These two are pretty strong magic cards, and though it requires a little work to incorporate them into your cube, it's actually not that hard. And while you're at it, you might also want to have a look at other colorless options like Meta Reshaper, Warping Will and Eldrazi Displacer. Depending on the power level of your cube, even Bearer of Silence and Eldrazi Obligated might be worth considering. Though this set of 6 cards is where the more powerful cube should probably start looking. The only thing you really need to do in order to incorporate these cards is to make sure that there are enough colorless mana sources in your cube. The most powerful of these are cube staples like Sol Ring and Mana Vault, but beyond that there are many viable options at different power levels and with different format legalities if that's a consideration for your cube. The talismans from Mirrodin and Modern Horizons are great ways to help players fix their colored mana, but they also fix for colorless. These can easily replace signets in cubes that use those in order to accommodate Thought-Knot Seer and friends. And note that you really don't need to include all 10 at once, just one demi-cycle or even only the talismans of the color combinations that you feel should have access to this effect can be enough. To stay on theme, there are also a bunch of cards that create Eldrazi Scions or Eldrazi Spawn tokens that can be sacrificed for colorless mana. The power level of these cards is probably too low for many cubes, but they can still be valid options for cubes of lower power levels or with other reasons for wanting token makers. If we look at lands that produce colorless mana, there are a couple that stand out because they produce 2 mana at once. Eldrazi Temple, City of Traitors and Ancient Tomb are great ways to allow for early Reality Smashers and Thought-Knot Seers. Temple of the False God and Shrine of the Forsaken Gods are less good at casting your Seers and Smashers ahead of time, but they do tap for colorless mana and even 2 mana in the right occasion and might be nice additions if you also want to enable the more expensive Eldrazi options. Lands that produce colorless mana but also have a secondary effect are a clean way to enable Eldrazi mana while not being bad outside of that context. Lands like Strip Mine, Wasteland, Reshadowed Port and Academy Ruins are played in many cubes already, but there are many other cards that you might want to consider like Westville Abbey, Mutavault and Cavern of Souls. A quick aside on Cavern of Souls, you cannot choose colorless for the second ability, so in order to cast an uncounterable Endbringer, you need an additional colorless source. Then Eye of Ugin and Sanctum of Ugin are considerations if you want to go a bit heavier on the Eldrazi theme by including a bunch of the more expensive ones. The most elegant way to fix your colorless mana are dual lands that also tap for colorless, making them, just like the aforementioned talismans, triple mana fixers. Both the Pain lands from Ice Age and Apocalypse and the Filter lands from Morningtide block are very reasonable dual lands in their own right, and simply replacing some other jewels in your cube for a cycle of these can help players with their colorless requirements at very low cost. A quick note on the basic land wastes: please don't use these. Having these in your basic land pile might seem like a great way to help players cast their Reality Smashers, but you'd much rather have your players work for their colorless mana while not tricking them into putting these really bad basic lands in their decks. In addition to that, it's just a very ugly solution that I don't think many players would appreciate. Since we're talking about Eldrazi, we should also mention the Eldrazi Titans, Kozilek, Emrakul and Ulamog. Most of these don't require colorless mana, Kozilek the Great Distortion being the great exception, but many of the cards we mentioned earlier can help to actually hardcast these cards. So if you go in that direction, you could play some more of the Titans than you would otherwise. The Emerge Eldrazi like Elder Deep Fiend also become much more interesting with cards like Eldrazi Temple and Eye of Ugin in the mix, and they in turn combine nicely with other previously mentioned cards like Palladium Mirror and Meta Reshaper. In this way, you can make an entire Eldrazi-friendly ecosystem in your cube, but you definitely don't have to go that far. For many cubes that are somewhat similar to the Magic Online Modern or Legacy cubes, you can easily include Meta Reshaper, Eldrazi Displacer, Thought-Knot Seer and Reality Smasher by swapping out your signets for talismans, replacing 10 dual lands with either filter lands or pain lands, or a mix of those, and making sure you have a handful of other colorless mana sources in mana rocks and utility lands. For my own 450 card cube, I sometimes swap in an Eldrazi package by adding the aforementioned 4 plus Endbringer and Willbreaker, supported by 5 talismans, around 6 other colorless mana artifacts, 10 dual lands that tap for colorless, 4 colorless utility lands, Eldrazi Temple and Ancient Tomb. My cube usually already has 3 or 4 Eldrazi Titans that get a little bit better because of Eldrazi Temple, and I usually also include Elder Deep Fiend and sporadically Descendant Mindbender because of both Eldrazi Temple and their synergy with Meta Reshaper. And that's all on this topic. I really highly recommend trying out Thought-Knot Serum Reality Smasher in your cube. It really doesn't take a lot to make these work, and having the 6th color can add a little extra special thing for your players to try and make work without costing you a lot of cube real estate. If you like this video, please feel free to like and subscribe, and if you have any questions or recommendations regarding this subject, I hope to read them in the comments. You can find me on Twitter if you have any other questions by searching for MTG CubeTube. And that's all. Thanks for listening and hope to see you next time.